Welcome back, everyone. We are so grateful that you're with us. We're sort of in the middle of Your Brain is Always Listening. And we just started the they, them, and other dragon section.
Anybody else ever wonder who they is all the time? They said, they did, they, yeah, it's always, there's so many theys. Let's identify them.
I know, that's my mom used to do.
My mom too. They said, and it's like, it's now gospel. They said.
So pay attention and hopefully you'll learn something. If you do, write it down, post it on any of your social media sites, hashtag Brain Warriors Way podcast. If you leave us a comment, question, or review, we'll enter you into a drawing to win either The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child, Tana's book that she'll sign for you, or Your Brain is Always Listening. You just tell us which one after we announce the winner. And you have a test.
And we have a winner. This is Debbie. So Debbie, you get to choose which book you'd like. Your Brain is Always Listening or The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child. I think she's probably going to choose yours because she said she's reading mine currently. Thank you, Dr. Amen and Tana, for sharing and delivering the messages you do. Not only do I subscribe to the podcast, but I buy supplements from BrainMD. I am reading Tana's new book and in the process of booking a SPECT scan for my adult daughter who is on the autism spectrum. We've seen some amazing changes in her since starting the Pro Brain Biotic Omega-3 and D3. I know once we have the scan and follow up with Dr. Pack, there may be changes in her supplements and some new ones. We look forward to see what Allison is fully capable of once her brain and body needs are met. I also enjoy the guests you have on your podcast. So a big heartfelt thank you for all you do. Thanks, Debbie. So I'm guessing she's going to want your book since it just came out, but you let us know.
She has yours already.
She already has mine. So
we're grateful to all of you. I mean, that's why we do what we do, because we want to be helpful and tame my abandoned, invisible, and insignificant dragon. The dragon we're talking about today, my God, they've haunted me forever. So your brain is always listening to the dragons from the past and other people, alive and dead. Mm-hmm. And last time we talked about the parent dragon. Your brain is always listening to your mother in your head and tried not to listen to your father in your head.
I sort of put earplugs in.
And the next one is the sibling and birth order dragons. And you're an only child. And the research on only children is actually really interesting.
You know, it's interesting, though. We have to talk about this, too. I'm an only child who then had half siblings much later in life, who then became the oldest and the responsible one. We have to talk about the confusion that some people feel with mixed families.
And I think almost half of the families today are mixed.
Right. Because I still am that person who's the responsible one in my family, taking care of everybody, like, you know.
And they looked up to you. They wanted you to solve their problems.
Even when I didn't want to.
So if you're the oldest child or the only child, you get 3,000 more hours of parenting than the other children.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Chloe, our little one, now she's the only and the youngest in a mixed family. So she was raised as an only, but she's got step siblings that are your children who were adult children. So she was raised by herself. Raised as an only child around adults and professionals, around doctors, nurses. And we hear all the time from her teachers. And just recently she got an email from a teacher saying, you know, you handle yourself so incredibly different than other high school students. And so they wrote her a letter of recommendation for college. And it's interesting to see how differently only children who are raised with so many adults. Now, the problem with that, though, she didn't socialize well with children at all. And that can be a problem.
Well, she ended up, and a lot of only children end up with the special, spoiled, and entitled dragon. I clearly didn't get that dragon.
Me either.
but the oldest, often responsible,
Mhm.
just like you said, more successful early in life, because they have sort of two coaches,
Mhm.
their mom and their dad, whether they're together or not. They, um, of the first 23 astronauts,
Mhm.
21 of them were oldest children.
Wow.
Of the 46 presidents, more than half were the oldest children, and only 6 of them were the youngest
Wow.
child.
Wow.
So
leadership.
Where you fall in line makes a big difference. They're not the best drivers.
What?
Middle children are the best drivers, and they're not as monogamous. The middle children, lucky for you,
Interesting.
are the most monogamous of all the
Why?
birth order, because they tend to be the peacemakers. So if you're like me with 5 sisters and an older brother, so the oldest child is special. The youngest child is special. The oldest child of a certain gender is special. So I have an older sister, an older brother.
You're the second son in Lebanese family.
Which means I'm completely expendable. I'm completely not special. And I felt that growing up. And plus my older brother, for whatever his own reasons, beat me up virtually every day until I was 6 or 7. And so there was a level of anxiety that I had, knowing I was not the special child. It was really clear my older brother was, because in a Middle Eastern family, the oldest boy is special. Mm-hmm. And wow, even though my dad owned grocery stores, you knew it, you could feel it. And
well, your dad was very traditional too.
Well, and actually wondered why the girls wanted to go to college.
Right.
It's like,
right.
Well,
she
you
encouraged,
don't need to do that.
He actually thought it was ridiculous. It was a waste of time.
Right.
But I felt that.
Which was a different
that's
time.
a generational thing, because I felt that. My stepdad said the same thing to me. I wrote about this in my book, The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child. I was really smart. And he said, why are you going to waste your time going to college, especially because I wanted to go to medical school or do something professional? And he said, why would you do that? You're going to get married and have babies. And he's like, you need to just find a rich guy and settle down. And I'm like, what? Like, it made no sense to me that they wouldn't encourage me. No one helped me figure out college. No one guided me. No one taught me. Like, I never toured a college. No one helped me with college applications, nothing.
Well, that's actually interesting, because no one helped me either.
Yeah.
Because no one had graduated from college in my family. I was the first one to graduate from college. So, and of my 6 siblings, only 2 of us graduated from college. So education wasn't a value, but somehow it became a value to me. And I knew I was going to go to college. So I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then after I was an infantry medic, I decided I could go to medical school. So where are you in your birth order? Oh, another interesting fact is the youngest children are more spoiled. I mean, that's just sort of makes sense. But they also are more likely to go to rehab. They're more likely to struggle with substance abuse because of the trauma they feel, because they're often the smallest, picked on, always could view themselves as less than, even though like my youngest sister didn't go to rehab, but my parents were wildly different with her than they were with my older sister. I remember my older sister wanted a bikini, and I think she got beaten for it. I mean, their corporal punishment was alive and well in my house. Right. And when Joanne wanted one, which was like 10 years later, my mom went with her to pick it out.
Oh, that's so funny.
And I remember my older sister going, this is not right. It's not
and
fair.
it's funny because as only children, as I'm listening to you, I can see certain traits like parenting styles of both for me with my daughter. So like the driving thing, I'm so freaked out about her driving. So I'm so cautious about letting her take any kind of risks. I'm so paranoid about it. I'm always watching her on Life 360. You know what I mean? So I hold on a little bit tight, but at the same time, she's like a very intense leader, super responsible, really very good with adults, that kind of a thing. So very interesting how even as a parent, you can see some of those traits and how you parent, because she's a oldest and a youngest. So
we would love for you to write us your experience on birth order and how you believe that has impacted your psyche. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the children dragons. So important because, once you have children, you basically have their voice in your head.
Always.
Stay with us.
Your brain is always listening. I am thrilled to be your guide and show you how to tame your dragons so that you can have the happiness, peace, and the relationships you deserve.
Welcome back. We are talking about the they, them, and other dragons. We sort of introduced the birth order dragons in the last episode, and we're going to talk about children. Once you have children, children's voices are always in your head. Do you ever want to feel like you can't do anything right? Just have kids.
Well, it's actually so funny because I was talking to someone the other day who was going to get the vaccination. And she was talking about wanting to be happy, husband, children. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you want to be happy. And those are the two things that can make you the most unhappy in the world.
Well, fortunately, that's not true for me,
or us.
Right.
But they say insanity is hereditary.
Right.
You get it from your children.
Becoming a parent, I have to say, is the most rewarding thing, the most challenging thing, and the most frustrating thing, all wrapped into one. But it's also, it's also the thing that will help you grow the most and bring you the most love, but you will feel the most frustration you've ever felt. So
in my first marriage, I married someone who had a 2-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
She was my childhood sweetheart, and we separated, and she got married and had a child. And then we got together right as I got into medical school. And
you adopted him.
And I adopted him because his biological father wasn't a responsible person. And so I have not been without children since 1979.
We all know that this is a thing for you, having children around.
And so talk about taming the insignificant dragon.
Yes.
It's up to that point, my life had been all about me.
Right.
Which is not that satisfying to have a life that's all about you. And it just felt so good. While at the same time, I'd never had such angry thoughts in my head before.
It's both, right? It's both. It can be frustrating and yet fulfilling. And yet when they succeed or you see them develop certain positive character traits, you get this joy. I mean, it's like all of the above, right?
You get all of the above when you have children.
Right. But when they criticize you, when your kids criticize you, it hurts. Like it's in your head.
Well, because it
makes you feel like a failure.
Criticizing the core of who you are.
Right.
So before we get into children, Marianne writes in, I'm 71 years old, and they used to call me skinny. I watched your show on Sunday and realized I was eating too much sugar, that even juice has too much sugar. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just sugar water. I also drink red wine daily, which has 14% alcohol. Is that too much alcohol for one day? And is it hurting my liver? I can feel that I'm overweight and don't like it. How long does it take to lose 10 pounds? Do you think this would happen to me? I look to you and Tana, and you're both slender. What do I do to get rid of the cravings?
The more carbs you eat, the more carbs you crave. The more sugar you eat, the more sugar you will crave. If you cut out the sugar, especially starting with juice or sugar in the mornings, is going to set you up to crave stuff all day long. So what I would start with, Marianne, is eating some healthy fat and protein for breakfast. Eggs and avocado, something like that for breakfast, or a smoothie with some kind of a really healthy, clean protein. A plant-based protein is probably best. Start with some sort of a healthy protein in the morning. You can have greens with that, would be great. But set yourself up to balance your blood sugar and not spike insulin, which is what carbs do. That's how you start. And then I've got all kinds of resources on my website, tanaamen.com, all kinds of great recipes for breakfast. And the alcohol, yes, I would limit it to 2 glasses a week, max.
Can I talk about the alcohol?
Of course.
So alcohol.
Can I stop you?
Yes.
No.
You have red hair.
I don't want to stop you.
Red hair, red stop sign. Alcohol increases cravings.
Yep.
Alcohol drops the dragon tamer, your frontal lobes, and you eat more, you forget about the calories, you eat. People saw me typing on my phone. What I did, just to show you, so 14 ounces of alcohol is about 200 calories. If you do that every day, multiply that times 365 days a year.
She said 1 glass. So 14 ounces.
But
is
14
2.
ounces is 2.
She said 14%.
Oh, I also drink.
Yeah. She's having 1 glass a day.
Daily. Oh, 14% alcohol.
Yeah.
Oh, so 1 glass is 100 calories.
Right.
Times 365 is 36,000 calories. Divided by 3,500 calories to make a pound.
Right.
Every year, just from the alcohol, you're putting 10.5 pounds of fat on your body.
And now, if you take out the juice if you're having that daily, it's the same thing. So replace the juice and the alcohol. And if you're going to have wine, no more than 2 glasses a week, you'll do much better. But cut the juice out, and you just did the same thing. You just reduced your caloric intake drastically. Not to mention, it's not just the calories. It's spiking your insulin. So every time you spike insulin, you can't burn fat with insulin present. So juice, sugar, especially when it's simple sugar like juice, it's going to spike your insulin quickly. And then you've got this insulin present and you're not burning fat. There you go.
You're so smart. I love that about you.
If you want more help, we have the Brain Warriors Way. I've got the Brain Warriors Way cookbook. I've got the Omni Diet
course at Amen University. That's a great course. You can actually spend 26 hours with Tana and I.
And I go into great detail about insulin and fat burning and calories and juice and sugar in the Omni Diet as well.
All right, children dragons. Your brain is always listening to what your children think of you, what they say to you. And they know that, and they use it to manipulate you. So Chloe that's not fair. There was a lot of that's not fair.
So my suggestion to you is I love Love and Logic parenting. It freed me. So I had a very, very, very strong-willed, difficult child when she was young, but fortunately I'm fairly intelligent, and I came to the conclusion and realization that it's not her job, it's mine to figure it out. And so Love and Logic really helped me and freed me. So that was really important. But, have these standard responses and be a broken record when your kids do these crazy things that drive you nuts. It's not fair, and throwing the temper tantrum. And I'm like, life isn't fair. It's a place with bad food and farm animals, and which would completely confuse her. She had no idea what I was talking about.
The state fair is what Tana's
right.
talking about.
But I would look at her and I'm like, it's not about being fair. It's about what you do to make it better. What are you doing to make a difference? And I would put the responsibility back in her court.
And I don't do things
for children who treat me that way.
For children that don't treat me with respect.
And I would tell her, I don't do things for people who treat me that way. Neither should you. So I was teaching her to expect people to treat you with respect. I was modeling how to draw boundaries and expect people to treat you with respect.
And one of the biggest mistakes, and I've made this mistake as a parent, is you love kids so much, you don't want them to suffer like you suffered.
Except, and this was another lesson I learned, entitled people can never be happy. So if you take away all of their learning lessons and you make life so easy for them that they never have to experience challenges because you don't want them to suffer the way you did, you just robbed them of not only opportunities to grow, you've created entitlement, and entitled people can never be happy. And the minute I learned that, I was like, whoa. And I literally, maybe I went a little extreme, but it was like I stopped taking forgotten homework to school. I stopped taking forgotten sweaters to school, forgotten lunches to school. It's your responsibility. It's like, this is your responsibility. And so I already did second grade. I already did third grade. It's up to you. And so
you only have to do that
a couple times. And
then they learn the lesson that they're responsible for how their life turns out, which is the number one hallmark of self-defeating behavior.
Right.
Blaming other people for how your life is turning out. But if you don't teach children to be responsible, whose fault is it?
Right.
And it won't stop when they're 18. You'll end up taking care of them when they're 40.
And if you're constantly worried about like, oh, they forgot their sweater, they're going to be cold. Well, they're not going to forget their sweater again. And is it going to be the end of the world if they have to sit inside the classroom at lunchtime so they don't go outside and play because it's cold? It's not going to be the end of the world. It's going to be a learning lesson.
So what did you learn? Write us about your experience with your children. Write it down, post it at any of your social media sites, #BrainWarriorsWay podcast. You can also go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com, leave us a comment, question, or review. And if we read it, we'll enter you into a drawing to win either a signed copy of Tana's book or my book. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. We're talking about the they, them, and other dragons. Today, we're going to talk about teachers and coaches. And basically what we want to share is mentors and how important mentors are to your mental and physical and brain health. But you have a review.
I have a review, and this is from Family Therapist Unplugged by Quincy Rose. This podcast has transformed not only me personally, but also my outlook on my mental health and physical disability, which has therefore revolutionized my practice as a family therapist. I've realized that I can help my people view their insecurities as a strength if they can actually view my own most crippling insecurity as a strength. I've had 3 traumatic brain injuries before the age of 19, which has led to focus impairments as well as challenges walking. The Amen's approach to understanding the function of every change or difference in our brain and body is what started the process of viewing myself and the world differently. And I'm going to challenge you, Quincy, to use the term other abled instead of disabled. So
there you have it.
There you have it.
All right. Today we're going to talk about mentors. In the book, I talk about teachers and coaches, dragons, and how important they are. And you actually write about mentors a lot, that it's
They're
very
huge in my life.
important to you. Now, all of us have had terrible teachers, and some of us have had terrible coaches, but we've also typically, think of Mrs. Rice, my third grade teacher. I adored her. She was cute, yes, it's true, but she was also present and encouraging, and I just wanted to go to school so much. So I still remember her. And then Sister Anastasia, the complete opposite. In fifth grade, I was in trouble all the time. These people really matter.
Yep.
And I think we don't value teachers as much perhaps as we could or we should, that they are so formative in helping to create healthy people.
Absolutely. I believe in having mentors in pretty much every area of my life, but especially the areas where I struggle the most. So if I'm struggling in an area, I love doing an assessment of like, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, and where the weaknesses are is where I want to make sure I have someone who's sort of helping me in that, with those difficult points.
And when you seek a mentor, don't seek to get. Seek to give. How can you make your mentor's life better, because they're more likely to want to be helpful to
also
you.
Don't seek someone who's just going to give you praise. Like for me, my favorite teachers were not the teachers who were just nice and always, complimentary. Those weren't my favorite teachers. My favorite teachers were the ones who pushed me. They were the ones who I typically liked. The teachers, I had the best relationships with the teachers that oftentimes other people didn't like. So, which is weird, but it's because I saw the value in how hard they pushed. Like I could, not if they were mean, not if they were unfair, but in the challenges. I like to be pushed. I don't want someone who's going to let me not be my best, if that makes sense. I want someone who's going to push me to be my best. Mediocrity is not the goal.
Do you want to tell the absolutely story?
Yeah. So still to this day, one of my very favorite professors, I was taking anatomy and phys, and everyone told me, don't take this guy's class. Do not take Mr. Rosario's class. He is so hard. He's so mean. So he used to teach gross anatomy in the medical school over at Loma Linda. And so I'm like, well, I just need to take whatever class I can get into because these classes were so impacted. And so I couldn't even get into his class because it was so impacted. And so what I was doing was I was petitioning the class. Everyone said, oh, don't worry, you'll get into his class because so many people, they're going to drop like flies after the first quiz. So I kept showing up and he told me, don't bother. Just don't even stay because my class is too full. You're not getting in. And I'm like, well, is that an order or can I stay if I want to? He's like, you can stay if you want to, but you're not getting in. So I stayed all the way through the first test and I aced the first test. Well, after the first test, a bunch of people left. And so he's like, fine, if you want in, you can get in. And he was like, he's very gruff. He's very intense, gruff. And he's funny. He's this redheaded Puerto Rican guy, big, gruff voice. And he was just very intense. I don't know why I resonated with him right away. It was very weird.
Because of your stepfather.
I don't know, but I just liked him. There was something about him that I just resonated with. And I liked how direct he was. He was just very intense, very direct. And so I took copious notes in this class and we got to the second test and I got an A on the test, but I got like a 94 and I missed this one question. And I'm like, that question is wrong. It's wrong. I took notes. That's a bad question. So I raise my hand and I tell him it's a bad question and he gets mad in front of the class. And I'm like, Miss Rosario, I don't mean to be disrespectful. That's a bad question. I have my notes. I took copious notes. I wrote it verbatim. We get into this argument. He's like, did you write it out exactly how I said? I said, yep. And I handed him my notes and he's like, are you sure? I go, absolutely. He looks at it. He gets like, he looks like he's going to scream at me. And all of a sudden he goes, fine, absolutely. And he changes the question. And from that point on, he called me absolutely for the rest of the course. But I loved him. And he gave me my letter of recommendation to get into school, to get into Loma Linda's nursing school. And he pushed me to be the best I could be. He was not going to take anything less. And those are the types of mentors I like. I know not everybody likes that. You have to pick what fits you. But
so where do you think you found that strength?
Well, I think for me, I didn't really have a choice. It was a survival
No,
skill.
you totally had a choice. You could have become a drug addict.
Well, I mean, I could have crumbled.
Right. I mean, we could have explained why your life fell apart, but your life didn't fall.
I think part of it is it was modeled. Grit was modeled.
You were
for
a
me.
little bit older too, right? Were you like 22 or 23?
Yeah, I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
But grit was modeled for me, and
By your
also by my mother. My mom, she's one tough woman. But also, I'd fallen down enough and wasn't really rescued, so it was sink or swim. So. It's all in my book, The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child. I mean, I had some tough experiences.
Thing that can't come out of that. I remember when I was in medical school, I had that same tendency. If there was a bad question, I would go talk.
Oh yeah, I
to the
frequently
teacher
got questions changed
about it. And where I went to medical school, I was in the charter class. So it was the first class of that medical school. And I was actually in medical school in Missouri for a couple of months before ORU opened up. And I was part of the bitch committee, which stood for blatant indiscretions by teachers committed against helpless students. And so when I got to ORU, I'm like, and I'd see some bad questions on tests. I'm like, guys, we need to form a bitch committee. Now, ORU is a Christian school.
Didn't fly.
And so we renamed it the Amos Committee, because Amos was the prophet in the Old Testament who told the women of Israel they were fat cows. And so we started the Amos Committee. And when you don't think things are right. Now, we had one professor, and he wouldn't change. He was so rigid.
I had one like that too.
He just wouldn't change it because he had to be right, which is not good. I mean, flexibility is an important mental health skill. But everybody else was reasonable. Right. And the idea of a test is to just know the information. And if you don't word it right, in a grammatical sense, or it could be taken multiple ways. But the principle is when things aren't right, it's okay to say they're not right. And that way you actually make the teachers better because they're more thoughtful.
And what are they there for? They're there to make you think. They're there to make you, question and think. And, I mean, sometimes they get a little miffed, but if they're a really good teacher, they like that you're thinking.
And they like that you're pushing.
Right.
So the impact of teachers and coaches, just so important. So if you're a teacher or you're a coach, Tana and I applaud you, and don't torment.
Well, and the best mentors and coaches are ones who don't tell you what to do. They lead you to figure it out through questions. They lead you to make the decisions. They lead you to understand, figure out what it is you want. So questions are the answer. You've sometimes heard that saying. You actually have really helped me, especially even with parenting, with listening. Because I have a tendency to want to let me show you, let me tell you. But as a coach, the best thing to do is use the proper questions and listen and let them figure it out. Because no one argues with their own decisions, right? Or if they do, they only have themselves to blame. They only have themselves to criticize and figure it out and change direction. So question.
So your brain is always listening to the teachers, coaches, mentors that you have had. What's your brain listening to? And thank God in medical school, I had some amazing mentors. I became a psychiatrist because of Stan Wallace. When my first wife tried to kill herself, I took her to see Dr. Wallace. He was the chairman of psychiatry at ORU. And I just loved him. I loved what he did. I mean, I became a psychiatrist basically because of him. And a number of the physicians there was very special.
So I don't think I ever told you this, but you know that I didn't have a special love for anything psych related when I was younger. So I was like, no walkie-talkies. I want them intubated, sedated. like I don't want to talk about warm, fuzzy feelings.
Yeah, you need to
or
tell
any
them
kind
what
of
no
feelings.
walkie-talkies means.
Intubated, sedated, out.
You didn't
induced
want
comas.
to nurse people who could interact with you.
No, I wanted like blood, guts, gore, skull split open. Like that was my thing, because my own past was crazy enough, and I just didn't want to deal with addiction, chaos, trauma. That was not where I was going with my nursing career. But when I did psych nursing, I knew it's not what I wanted to do. My psych professor said I had a knack for it and wanted me to switch direction. She wanted me to go into psych nursing. And I'm like, absolutely not. She's like, you have a gift for this. You should do this. I never told you this. So she was trying to convince me. So if she's
actually right.
If she saw me now, she'd probably laugh.
Well, because she was right. Once you tame your dragon
from the past. See, that's one of my dragons speaking in my ear. Like,
once you tame your dragons, you can live your potential, because you're actually very helpful.
That was a reflexive. That was just a reflexive. A reflex. That was a reflex to the pain from my own past. I would call it psychobabble.
When we come back, we're going to talk about the Friends, popular kids, mean girls, and bully dragons. Stay with us.
Welcome back. We are talking about dragons. Today we are talking about Friends, popular kids, mean girls, and bullies. Oh boy. I think most of us know something about one of these. I mean, we all know about Friends, but most of us know something about the popular kids, the mean girls, and the bullies at some point in our lives. Even if you were one of the popular kids or mean girls or a bully, it's hard to keep that position. So you have to do a lot to stay there. And it can be pretty painful, pretty challenging.
So I want you to think about your life and how have the other children around you when you were growing up impacted what you believe about yourself. So your friends, the popular kids, the mean girls, the bullies, many people have been bullied. And it's actually worse now than it's ever been
because of
the internet.
Yeah.
And even our niece was shamed on the internet. Really, like she's 8 years old and this craziness is going on. So part of the thoughts you have
we get it all
and
the time.
The voices in your head are from these categories growing up. And I just want you to think, what has been the influence of the other children and the other teenagers when you were growing up on your development?
Yeah.
Because they're often telling you you're less than they are, and they do that as a way to build themselves up.
But if you already have certain insecurities, even if you don't, but if you already have certain insecurities and you already felt a little bit of that and it pushes on, a wound from the past, boy, that can really trigger a lot of pain and a lot of problems that can set you up going forward.
Did you write about it?
I did.
Relentless Courage of a Scared Child when you changed schools in high school?
It was miserable. It was awful. I did write about it.
So talk about it a little bit.
So school was not fun for me. I was the dorky, skinny, weird, bookworm, nerdy kid. So, when I was young, and then all of a sudden, like, I know this is like super unusual and weird and odd, but my middle school years became really good. I worked my way out of that place, became a cheerleader. So 7th, 8th, 9th grade were actually great years for me. And I finally made friends. I figured out school, really liked school. But another thing happened and I developed really young. Now, we didn't have the internet back then. People weren't doctoring their photos. Every girl you saw didn't look, like they were overdeveloped. So it happened like really fast and it sort of shocked me. But I had my support system. It was okay because I had the support system of girls. I looked older than I was, but it was okay. But then we moved. And we moved at the end of my 10th grade year, and it wasn't okay anymore. All of a sudden, I show up at a school, and for whatever reason, and I think if I had had a different type of support system, if I had had more confidence, I would have handled it totally differently. But I didn't have that. And so because of my own insecurities from the past, my own lack of support, I didn't know how to handle all of these changes happening with me, as well as the girls that were not just girls, boys, talking about me. And I just crumbled and I went into this shell of myself and I was bullied. Like I was really bullied. You don't just get bullied because you're overweight or because you look like you think you aren't attractive. Girls that are overdeveloped or look a certain way that for whatever reason you don't fit in for any reason, you can get bullied.
Well, and if you're really pretty, are really pretty, it makes a lot of girls feel very insecure, like you're going to take their boyfriend.
Oh, I got labeled as a slut. I mean, and I didn't even know these people. Like it was pretty crazy.
How did you get labeled as a slut?
I don't know. Some guy I never met said I slept with him and it was all over school. And I was like, what? I didn't know anybody. It was so crazy. So I literally went into a shell within myself. I became very depressed. I remember walking around school with my books in front of me and not talking to anyone. I hated school. So.
And the biggest influence for teenagers is actually not their parents. It's their friends. And we all have the idea that, oh, everybody else has this perfect life and our life is terrible. What teenagers don't understand, actually what most adults don't understand, is that most people suffer.
Right.
And most people, the average number of
unique.
dragons from the past that people have is 6. That's the average.
And none of our thoughts are unique when we're in pain. Like everyone's had painful thoughts, but it's interesting because if you help your kids develop coping skills, like we've raised Chloe so differently. She's been bullied at school, but she handles it so differently because she's got a different level
issues with friends.
But she's got a different level of confidence. How she handles herself is radically different. Like how she handles situations that happen at school is just so different from how I did. She doesn't crumble and so you can help your kids with this. You can help yourself with this by developing these coping skills, these strategies.
Yeah. So I remember for me, I was the smallest in my class and I got teased about that. But it caused me to always look to be a peacekeeper because I wasn't going to win a fight.
Well, and you're funny. So you
win
de-escalated, right?
A fight.
Right.
So I de-escalated situations quickly.
Were you always class clown?
No, I don't think people would have labeled me as the class clown.
Because you're really funny. Oh, but you were a flirt.
Well, in college, I actually got voted most friendly. What was on the ballot, though, was biggest flirt.
Right.
But Gloria Carlson also got voted biggest flirt. And she hated that. And so they changed the award to
so funny.
Most friendly. So, yes, I have this curse.
Yeah.
I'm not a flirt.
You can be.
Yeah, I have that skill, but I'm not because I'm taken and, under the pain of death, apparently, according to you. So
I've never said that. I just said till death do us part.
So how have friends, popular kids, mean girls, and, why are people mean?
Their own insecurities. I really believe this. When people are mean, it really has very little to do with you. Has very little to do with you. It has to do with them.
Because they're mean girls now.
Right. It has very little to do
on the internet.
But it has little to do.
We'll talk about internet trolls coming up. But
even like some of the reviews that you and I get, or the internet trolls that we get, they're saying things that they don't know anything about. So it really has nothing to do with us. It has to do with them.
Well,
their own life experience.
And early on, when I sort of went another way than my colleagues and said, hey, if you don't look, you don't know. You should be looking at the brain. Why don't we scan the brain? I was bullied. And
you still are sometimes.
But I don't pay attention to it. And when I don't pay attention to it, I feel just fine.
Right.
But when I pay attention to it, I know that hurt can light a fire and I can get pretty angry about it.
Well, and that stuff used to really get to me. But my strategy now is when I see something like that. So I had someone actually leave a review and say that basically everything I wrote about my life had to have been a lie, because I don't even know why, but
so
it had to have been a lie.
Nobody has that much drama?
Yeah. I was like, my life isn't even that dramatic compared to some of the people I know. I mean, I almost didn't write it because I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. I wasn't chained to a radiator. I wasn't, whatever. I wasn't sex trafficked like some of the people that we know. But the point being, this person doesn't know me. And so my strategy is to stop and go, okay, it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with that person's life experience. It has nothing to do with me. It has to do with where that person is coming from. So, what you think of me is none of my business. And it obviously has nothing to do with me.
Yeah. Unless they're hurting you. And then you have to ask for help.
Oh yeah. No, you have to draw boundaries. Like drawing boundaries is okay. But if it's something you can't ignore, ignore it.
It's a conflict for parents. If they notice their children are being bullied, how much to step in and when?
So for me, it's like, is this something because if you're not careful, your kids will get bullied more, right? There's always this balance. So you always want to teach your kids to be able to stand up for themselves. So if you're able to coach them, if it's something that it's not dangerous, if you're able to coach them to be able to do it for themselves, if it's something they can handle by themselves, they should, because you want to teach them the skill to be able to do that in life. If it gets to a point where you can see that they can't handle it by themselves, you can see that this is out of control, you need to step in. I mean, there's a point where it's too much.
Yeah. I mean, that's why God gave us parents.
Right.
To be our frontal lobes until ours develop.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do too much, they don't develop the skill.
Right. And you can make it worse.
So what have you learned about friends, popular kids, mean girls, bullies? The big thing for me is hurt people.
Yeah.
Is that when people are awful to others, something may be going on in their brain or in their family,
right,
or in their own mind that causes that. And so it's not all about you. Behavior is way more complicated than most people think. We hope this is helpful. When we come back, we're going to talk about more of the dragons, the they, them, and other dragons. Stay with us.
If you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're interested in coming to Amen Clinics, use the code PODCAST10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.